Story 3. Don't judge the book from the cover. One. Setting the scene. A day at Untag Surabaya. It was a warm Wednesday afternoon at the campus of Untag Surabaya. The sun peeked gently through the canopy of trees lining the central walkway, casting dappled shadows across the pavement. Students moved in every direction, some heading to class with notebooks clutched in hand, others walking in small groups toward the canteen, their conversations filled with jokes, gossip, and the occasional complaint about homework. The lobby near the front entrance served as a hub for student activity. A few students sat cross-legged on the floor with their laptops, finishing up assignments due that day. Others sat on the benches, talking over project ideas or simply scrolling through social media during their break. The buzz of energy that filled the air was the essence of campus life, alive, unfiltered, and dynamic. Amid this daily rhythm were 5 friends whose personalities couldn't be more different. Buddy and Badra stood out to those who paid close attention. Both were diligent students, though their approaches differed. Buddy was more transparent, organized, on time, and actively involved in academic discussions. Badra, however, was a bit of a mystery. Badra walked with the easy swagger of someone who didn't take life too seriously. He joked around, made fun of lectures, and often pretended to struggle during class discussions. His friends, Danai and Alex, treated him like one of them, a carefree student who viewed academic success as something reserved for others. But what they didn't know was that Badra was playing a role, hiding a sharp mind and a disciplined routine behind his laid-back smile. 2. Hidden genius. Badra's double life. On the surface, Badra was the kind of student who drifted through campus life with ease and a hint of mischief. His quick jokes and goofy remarks made him a magnet for friends, especially Danai and Alex, who enjoyed his company because he never made them feel small. To them, Badra was just another laid-back guy who didn't take school too seriously. But behind his playful facade was a different story entirely. Badra's carefree attitude wasn't carelessness, it was a shield, carefully crafted and silently maintained. Beneath his lazy grin and loud humor, he was one of the most brilliant students in his department. It wasn't something he advertised. Instead, he kept his intelligence tucked away, like a secret notebook only he could read. Every morning before class, while most students were still wiping sleep from their eyes, Badra had already gone over the day's material. He wasn't just scheming lecture slides, he was reading supplementary articles, watching academic videos, and making connections between concepts that many students hadn't even heard of yet. He would often find a quiet spot in the back corner of the campus library or under the acacia trees near the faculty building, where he could scribble ideas into his notebook without interruption. His notes were more than summaries, they were filled with questions, diagrams, and reflections. He annotated theories with real-life examples, challenged textbook conclusions, and sometimes wrote many essays just to test his understanding. It was as if he were having a one-on-one dialogue with the material, trying to push past memorization and into true comprehension. Assignments, too, were treated with uncommon care. While his friends assumed he would copy from someone at the last minute, Badra was quietly staying up past midnight, crafting detailed responses, formatting his citations correctly, and even proofreading multiple times before hitting submit. His submissions stood out not because they were flashy, but because they were thoughtful, well-organized, and insightful. Professors often returned his papers with quiet compliments or a knowing smile during class. His exam scores regularly placed him in the top 10. On paper, he was a high achiever. But few knew, because he never talked about it. He didn't post about grades or share screenshots of academic praise. For Badra, knowledge was something to be lived with, not shown off. So why the disguise? Badra had his reasons rooted in years of painful experience. In high school, he had once been that student who always raised his hand, always had an answer, always aced his tests. But instead of earning admiration, he found himself the subject of ridicule and resentment. Classmates called him the walking encyclopedia or Mr. Perfect. Some accused him of trying too hard, others simply avoided him. His honesty and enthusiasm were misread as arrogance, and slowly, Badra learned that being smart came at a social cost. He had lost friends, been excluded from group activities, and found himself eating alone more times than he liked to admit. It made him question whether being himself was worth it. So, when he entered college at Untag Surabaya, he made a silent promise to himself: this time, he would blend in. He wouldn't be the boy who tried too hard. He would be average, at least on the surface. That's why he laughed when others mocked difficult subjects. He made a show of yawning in class, even when he was fully engaged. He faked confusion when someone asked him a question, sometimes even giving a wrong answer on purpose. He pretended to forget deadlines, only to secretly submit his work ahead of time. To his friends, it seemed like Badra was just as chill and indifferent as they were. But beneath that mask was someone who deeply respected learning, someone who stayed up at night reflecting on human rights, technology ethics, and environmental policy. Someone who wrote essays not for grades, but to sharpen his thinking. Someone who had trained himself not just to absorb information, but to question, compare, and create. For Badri, it was easier to be underestimated than to be isolated. Still, there were cracks in the disguise. Sometimes, Buddy, his quiet, observant friend, would catch a glimpse of the real Badri. A comment too sharp, a reference too obscure, a question too precise. Buddy noticed, but said nothing. He understood. He, too, had felt the pressure of fitting in while trying to stay true to oneself. In time, the world would see Badri for who he really was. But until then, he remained a hidden genius living a double life, protecting himself, and quietly, powerfully preparing for the day he no longer had to hide. 3. Buddy's growing awareness. Buddy, on the other hand, had known Badri since orientation week. From day one, he noticed small things: the way Badri's notes were color-coded, how he always had the cleanest digital folder structure, and how he subtly corrected other students without drawing attention. Buddy began to sense that the Badri everyone saw wasn't the whole story. As they started studying together more frequently, Buddy got to see the real Badri in action. During one of their private study sessions, Badri solved a complicated logic question in under a minute while Buddy was still figuring out the structure. "You make it look easy," Buddy commented. Badri grinned sheepishly, "I just got lucky." But Buddy wasn't fooled. Over time, he observed how Badri helped his friends Danai and Alex without making it obvious. He'd suggest ideas in a way that made them think they came up with them. He'd leave books open on the right page or accidentally forward helpful resources in the group chat. Eventually, Buddy confronted him. "Why pretend you're not smart?" he asked one evening as they packed their bags in the library. Badri looked down, hesitating. "People like me better this way. They don't expect much. I'd rather be underestimated than feel left out again." Buddy nodded slowly. He understood. But he also saw the burden Badri carried, the pressure of hiding his true self just to maintain peace. It was then that Buddy made up his mind: he would support Badri, not just as a friend, but as someone who reminded him that real intelligence didn't have to hide. For the friend group: Danai, Alex, and the surface assumptions. Danai and Alex were the kind of students who made campus life feel fun, light, and sometimes a little chaotic. Danai loved music. He was almost never seen without his guitar. If there was an open bench, he'd be strumming a few chords, humming a melody, or composing lyrics in his notebook instead of writing lecture notes. He had a gentle spirit and a vivid imagination, but he often lost track of deadlines and struggled to focus in class. Alex, on the other hand, was tech-savvy and witty. He could build a website in an hour but often forgot about his homework. He joined discussions when he felt like it, usually making sarcastic comments or offering humorous insights that distracted the group from their academic stress. He was brilliant in bursts, but consistency wasn't his strong suit. To Danai and Alex, Badri was just one of them. Someone who didn't take university too seriously, someone who got by without trying too hard. They liked him for that. He made them feel comfortable, accepted, unjudged. They never suspected that he was actually miles ahead in understanding and performance. In their eyes, Badri was friendly, humble, and not particularly academic. So when he made smart observations in discussions, they brushed it off as luck. When he helped them revise, they thought he had simply memorized the materials well. They didn't ask how he always had the best reference links, or why his explanations always made things clearer. Their assumptions created a one-sided view of Badri. He was the laid-back friend, not someone you'd copy notes from, but someone you'd hang out with after class. But deep down, that was starting to change, thanks in part to Buddy's gentle influence and Badri's own growing inner conflict. 5. The turning point: a group assignment that changed everything. The shift came during a group project in their critical thinking class. Their professor had assigned a controversial topic: does social media shape academic integrity? It required research, argument development, presentation skills, and peer collaboration. The groups were randomly selected. Badri, Danai, Alex, and Buddy found themselves paired together. At first, Danai and Alex groaned. "We'll just wing it," Danai said, pulling out his guitar. "Maybe we can sing our way through the presentation." But Buddy wasn't having it. "This is 30% of our grade," he reminded them. "And we're presenting in front of 2 other classes." Badri watched the discussion quietly. He could tell the group needed structure fast. So he took the lead, but in his usual indirect way. "Hey," he said casually, "I found a few articles we can use. I'll drop them in the group chat. Maybe we can meet tomorrow and decide on our outline." "Sure, bro," Alex said, surprised. "You're getting serious now." Badri laughed. "Well, even a lazy guy like me doesn't want to fail." But the next day, Badri came with a printed draft of a possible argument structure. He had underlined quotes, listed references, and even had suggested visuals for the slides. Buddy smiled to himself. He knew this was Badri's real side, finally peeking through. As they began to prepare, Danai and Alex started noticing something. Badru wasn't just suggesting ideas, he was guiding the flow of the discussion, anticipating questions, and helping them polish their parts without sounding arrogant. After their presentation, which earned praise from the lecturer and applause from classmates, Danai turned to Badru and said, "Man, where've you been hiding this brain?" Badru chuckled. "Maybe I've been hiding it behind jokes and guitar tunes." Alex gave him a playful shove. "You've been playing us?" "Nah," Badru replied, "just playing along." In that moment, something shifted. Danai and Alex began to see Badru differently, not as someone pretending to be average, but as someone who had quietly supported them all along. They didn't feel betrayed. Instead, they felt motivated. Inspired. If someone like Badru, who blended in so effortlessly, could also be that sharp, maybe it was time for them to start showing a little more of their potential too. 6. The reveal when true colors shine. Word began to spread about how well the group had done on their critical thinking project. Their lecturer even asked permission to use their presentation as an example for the next class. Suddenly, classmates who had once overlooked Badru were starting to notice his presence. Buddy, who had always known the truth, simply watched with a quiet smile. It wasn't long before the moment of full revelation came. During a seminar workshop held in the university auditorium, students were encouraged to volunteer as moderators or presenters. No one expected Badru to participate until his name was suddenly called. He walked confidently to the front, wearing a clean, ironed shirt and holding a small notebook. The topic was challenging, the role of youth in shaping ethical technology. It was the kind of topic that demanded not just knowledge but insight, clarity, and composure. Badru delivered a sharp, thoughtful presentation, citing case studies, offering reflections on digital ethics, and even referencing a few studies from international journals. His voice was calm, his words articulate. He wasn't showing off, he was just sharing what he knew, but in a way that left the entire auditorium in quiet awe. In the crowd, Danai and Alex sat with mouths half open. "Is that Badru?" Alex whispered. Danai blinked. "Bro. He's got references. APA style." Buddy grinned and whispered, "Told you not to judge the book by its cover." When the presentation ended, students applauded. A few came up to Badru with questions. The lecturer shook his hand. Danai and Alex didn't know what to say at first. They just stood there as their friend, the one they thought was just playing dumb, suddenly emerged as one of the most articulate voices in the room. Later that evening, sitting under the big tree near the canteen, the group sat in their usual spot, eating fried tofu and sipping iced tea. "So," Alex finally said, "you've been holding out on us." Badru laughed. "I just didn't want to be seen as a know-it-all. I like being your friend. I didn't want anything to change." Danai shook his head. "Nothing's changed, man. We're just impressed." "No," Buddy added, "something has changed. You've inspired us." There was a moment of silence, but it wasn't awkward. It was full of thought. Something deeper had been understood about identity, perception, and self-worth. 7. The message more than just a lesson. From that moment on, the group's dynamic shifted, not in terms of their friendship, which remained strong, but in the depth of their connection and shared purpose. It wasn't sudden. There was no dramatic transformation. But like sunlight gradually filtering through a window, the change was real, warm, and unmistakable. Danai, once only known for his laid-back nature and love of music, began to show a sharper edge. He started asking thoughtful questions in class, tentative at first, but growing in confidence. His lyrics, too, evolved. What once were just playful rhymes became poetic reflections on youth, knowledge, and social issues. He began performing spoken word at student gatherings, using his voice to inspire peers who struggled to find theirs. Alex, the tech-savvy but disorganized member of the group, took a surprising turn as well. He began organizing digital workshops for juniors and developing mobile apps for student organizations. One of his apps allowed students to track assignments and set study goals, a tool he first built for himself and then expanded when he saw others could benefit. His chaotic energy transformed into something structured and generous. And Badru, perhaps the most profound change of all, stopped pretending. No longer hiding behind forced ignorance or false modesty, he began to share what he knew. Not with arrogance or superiority, but with purpose. In class, he spoke up carefully, clearly. When classmates asked questions, he answered with empathy. He didn't seek attention, but he no longer avoided it either. He and Buddy, his quiet and insightful companion, began informally mentoring younger students. Some were overwhelmed first years, struggling with time management, others faced imposter syndrome or academic anxiety. These mentorship sessions weren't formal programs. They often started as casual conversations in the canteen or under the big tree beside the library, but slowly grew into something more structured and meaningful. Ironically, many of these discussions happened in the very same lobby where people used to laugh off Badru as just another lazy student. Now, That same space echoed with stories of growth, challenge, and camaraderie. The phrase "don't judge a book by its cover" became more than a moral. It became a truth, a lived, shared experience. Students began thinking twice before labeling someone based on their behavior or appearance. They saw firsthand that behind the quietest student might lie the sharpest mind. That the class clown could also be a deep thinker. That someone pretending to be lost might just be protecting themselves. People learned that intelligence doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it listens. Sometimes it hides, not out of shame, but survival. And when it finally reveals itself, it doesn't need applause. It needs acceptance. More importantly, friendship, as Badri, Danai, Alex, and Buddy had discovered, meant celebrating each other's growth. It wasn't a competition. There was no envy, no shame in falling behind, only the joy of walking forward together. They built each other up. Where one stumbled, another offered a hand. Where one excelled, the others cheered. And Badri, looking back, never regretted the path he took. Pretending to be ordinary had taught him humility. He had learned to listen, to read people's emotions, to understand that not everyone valued academic success the same way. He had learned that silence could be a kind of strength. That sometimes, giving others the space to shine was more meaningful than shining alone. But revealing his real self, his thoughts, his discipline, his dreams, was equally important. It gave others permission to do the same. To speak up. To work harder. To be proud of who they were without fearing rejection. Badri realized that true learning was not just about acquiring knowledge, but sharing it. Not just about shining, but lighting the way for others. And so, in the ordinary corners of Untac Surabaya, the familiar buzz of the canteen, the hush of the library, the lobby where everything began, and the shaded bench beneath the tree, Badri and his friends continued their journey. They were no longer just students chasing deadlines. They had become thinkers, doers, and mentors. They weren't perfect, but they were growing. Together. Because once you stop judging books by their covers, you start reading stories that matter.